The first sound was not a bell. It was a vibration, like the world itself had taken a breath and refused to let it out. Anja staggered down the church steps, clutching her ears. But there was no noise, only a silence so heavy it pressed against her chest. Across the street, shadows that should not exist leaned out of the broken windows, watching her, waiting. How did they get here? Why did the people of Black Creek vanish, leaving only dust and this cursed bell tower? Just minutes earlier, the town was nothing but empty streets and faded signs. Then one laugh, one reckless push against the iron clapper, and everything changed. What rang in that tower was not a sound, it was a key. And now, the lock it opened is awake. Anja's lungs burned. The silence exploding in her ears felt like it was suffocating the entire town. Her eyes locked on the motionless shapes that had appeared behind the dust-covered shop windows. For a moment she forgot to breathe, because those shadows had eyes. Black, hollow eyes, yet they were staring straight at her. Beside her, Klaus trembled as he tried to lift his fallen camera, screaming, "Stellan, Ilona." But the church doors remained a dark, gaping maw, and nothing emerged from within. It was as if the world had been condemned to silence with the press of a single button. And yet, only minutes ago, everything had been ordinary. The sharp growl of the engine, Stellan's cool demeanor, Ilona's laughter, the worry of Klaus's camera. When they drove past the sign that read Population 0, it had felt like a joke, just an empty settlement, an abandoned adventure. But now Anja understood. The sign had been a warning, because this place was never truly empty, and it had never been abandoned. Inside the church, the leather-bound diary she had found still burned in her memory. The toll is not a sound, it's a key. It doesn't open a door, it opens you. Don't let it ring. But as Ilona's laughter echoed off the tower's stone walls, those words felt less like a warning and more like a prophecy. That first dreadful hum had shattered their world. Now Anja knelt on the cobblestone street, trying to move without letting her footsteps echo. But the shadows were starting to stir. First, one tilted its head. Then another lifted a trembling arm. Still silent, horribly, impossibly silent. It was as if invisible strings were pulling them all at once, puppets to a single will. Klaus's breath quickened, his wide eyes darting wildly. "They see us, don't they? Anja, are they alive?" he whispered. Anja couldn't answer. Her gaze was fixed on the top of the cursed bell tower. The clapper was swinging on its own, untouched by any hand, and with each swing, an unseen pressure rippled through the air, draping the stones in heavier darkness. She tried to choke back the scream rising in her throat, but the words escaped her lips. "We were never meant to be here." The silence clung to their skin like frost. Anja and Klaus staggered into the middle of Main Street, desperate to put distance between themselves and the church. But the shadows and the windows moved with them. Each time they turned their heads, more shapes pressed against the glass, dozens of dark figures, unmoving, faceless, yet undeniably aware. Klaus's voice cracked as he tried to whisper, "We need to run, now." His words felt like stones dropped into a bottomless well, vanishing instantly. There was no echo, no sound at all, as though the silence swallowed everything before it could exist. Anja grabbed his arm. Her pulse was a hammer against her ribs. "Wait, look." At the end of the street, the crooked steeple loomed over them, and from its high window, the black bell glowed faintly like molten iron cooling in the dark. Its clapper swung gently, though no wind touched it. Each arc sent a wave that pressed the air heavier against their lungs. Klaus clutched his head, his eyes wet and frantic. "It's inside us," he whispered, gagging. "It's not just sound, it's inside us." Anja remembered the diary. Its jagged script burned into her mind. "It doesn't open a door. It opens you." She wanted to believe it was just words, a fragment of madness scrawled by someone long dead. But every instinct screamed the opposite. A sudden movement snapped her thoughts. Across the street, the door of the barbershop creaked open. A figure stepped out, its body stiff, jerking slightly as though every bone resisted motion. Its face was gray, features stretched into a hollow parody of human expression. Then another emerged, and another. Within seconds, the sidewalks filled with silent walkers, all facing the church, all turning their heads toward Anja and Klaus with synchronized slowness. Panic surged. Klaus grabbed Anja's hand and pulled her toward the truck. Their boots scraped against the cobblestones, but no sound followed, only the suffocating silence that made their flight feel like a nightmare played on mute. The truck was still there, parked beneath the skeletal remains of a Klaus yanked at the door handle, his fingers trembling. Come on, but the engine, when he twisted the key, made no noise. The lights flickered weakly, then died, as though the silence had devoured the machine itself. Behind them, the crowd had stopped moving. Every figure stood still, their hollow eyes fixed on the truck. The bell clapper swung harder, and the pressure grew unbearable. Anja pressed her palms over her ears, though there was no sound. In the suffocating quiet, she mouthed the only truth she knew. It's already too late. High above, the bell tower was a tomb of shadows. Stellan dragged Ilona back from the swaying clapper, his breath ragged, his hands trembling. Enough, Ilona, do you hear me? We have to get out of here. But she was gone, her eyes glazed, lips trembling with a smile that wasn't hers. It's beautiful, she whispered, her voice hollow, distant, as if echoing from somewhere far beneath the earth. She reached for the bell again, fingers brushing its black surface. The metal drank the light, swallowing her reflection whole. Stellan grabbed her wrist, but the touch burned like fire. He yanked back, staring at his palm. Veins spread under his skin as though the silence itself had entered him. His heart slammed in his chest. He'd fought storms at sea, marched through war zones with a camera in hand, but nothing felt like this terror. Ilona, he barked, shaking her. For the first time, her eyes flickered with recognition. It opens you, she mouthed. Can't you feel it? It's already inside us. And then the bell moved on its own. Slowly, impossibly, the massive clapper swung and struck the iron rim. Not a ring, not even a hum, just the crushing silence that spilled down the tower like black water. Stellan staggered, choking, as though the air had turned to stone. He pulled Ilona toward the narrow staircase, their footsteps lost in the void. Each turn of the spiral steps felt endless, the silence pressing harder with every descent. But when they reached the bottom, the doors that had once hung open were sealed shut. Heavy oak, iron bands twisted tight, as if welded by unseen hands. He slammed his shoulder into the wood, veins bulging in his neck, but the door didn't move. From the cracks in the stained glass above, he could see figures gathering outside, dozens, maybe hundreds. Their silhouettes pressed against the glass, faces gray and featureless, eyes empty sockets, glowing faintly with the same dull light as the bell. Ilona pressed her hand to the door, her smile returning. They're waiting, she whispered. For the third toll. Stellan's stomach dropped. 3, always 3. He didn't know why, but every story, every ritual, every nightmare ended with 3. He spun toward the staircase, knowing the bell would swing again, knowing they had only seconds. Main Street was no longer empty. Anja dragged Klaus by the arm, her breath ragged, her body shaking under the weight of the silence. The figures had left their windows now. They walked slowly, deliberately, their movements stiff as marionettes pulled by unseen strings. Some shuffled from doorways, others stepped out of alleys, all converging toward the church. Their faces were pale as ash, mouths closed in unnatural stillness. Klaus stumbled, clutching his stomach. It's inside me, he gasped, falling to his knees. The hum, it's still inside me. Anja pulled him up, tears stinging her eyes. Don't listen to it. Don't let it take you. She forced him toward the truck again, but the vehicle sat dead, its headlights like blind eyes staring into the dark. The key twisted, the ignition clicked, but no spark came, only silence. Her panic spiked as the crowd drew closer. The nearest figure turned its head at an angle too sharp for bone, its hollow gaze locking onto hers. She screamed, but not a sound left her throat. Inside the church, Stellan slammed his fists against the sealed doors. The wood rattled but did not yield. Behind him, Ilona tilted her head back. Eyes rolled white as the bell's glow seeped through the tower. It's calling, she whispered, arms outstretched like a worshipper. Stellan grabbed her shoulders. Fight it, Ilona, fight it. But her lips curled into a smile that wasn't hers. The clapper above groaned, the air tightening like a held breath. The second toll had already broken them. The third would destroy everything. Anja dragged Klaus behind a crumbling stone wall, pressing him flat against the cold surface. The crowd of figures shuffled past, heading toward the church doors. Every step was in perfect unison. Dozens of bodies, hundreds of feet, yet not a single sound touched the earth. Klaus trembled, pointing with a shaking finger. The figures weren't just walking, they were forming a circle closing in around the church like a noose. The diary's words echoed in Anja's skull. It doesn't open a door, it opens you. She realized then the bell wasn't meant to summon. It was meant to transform. Stellan's voice rang silent in the void as he pushed Ilona away, racing toward the staircase. If he could reach the bell, maybe he could stop it. But deep down, he knew the truth. The third toll wasn't coming. It was already here. The third toll was not a sound. It was an ending. The bell clapper swung once more, slicing through the void with impossible force. And the silence that poured from it was absolute erasing breath, thought, even the memory of sound itself. Anja collapsed to her knees in the street, her vision swimming as the figures stopped mid-step. For a heartbeat, all was frozen. Then, one by one, their mouths opened. No scream, no moan, only a yawning nothingness, as though each figure was a doorway into a place that should not exist. Klaus clawed at the cobblestones, eyes rolling back, his voice trying to form a plea that no one could hear. Inside the church, Stellan dragged Ilona to the altar, his body failing, his chest heaving in silence. Her eyes burned with unnatural light, her smile twisted in ecstasy. "Do you see it?" she mouthed, blood streaming from her nose. "It's opening us." Above them, the bell shuddered, glowing red like a heart beating in the dark. Its light spilled down the walls, carving symbols into the stone that pulsed with every invisible strike. Stellan staggered toward the pulpit, grabbed the diary from the floor, and with trembling hands tore the pages free, scattering them into the air. But the words burned, igniting as though the truth could not survive the toll. Outside, the circle of figures turned in unison, facing the church. Their arms rose slowly, hands outstretched toward the steeple. Anja's terror became clarity. The bell wasn't summoning them. It was them. The townspeople had never vanished. They had been changed, reshaped into vessels of silence, waiting for the key to unlock them. And now the lock was open. The church shook, stone splitting, the tower groaning as the bell swung higher, faster, feeding on every terrified heartbeat. Stellan wrapped his arms around Ilona, holding her as her body convulsed. His last thought wasn't fear, it was surrender. The bell struck one final time, unleashing a silence so profound it shattered the night sky. The purple haze above split apart, and darkness bled across the horizon like ink in water. Anja clutched Klaus, their bodies trembling against the church steps. As the silent wave washed over them, the world dissolved into nothing. And in that nothing, Black Creek lived again.